Welcome to this latest edition in our video interview series here at iConnect. My name is Richard Albert, and along with Tom Ginsberg and David Landau, I'm a co-editor of iConnect. And today we are welcoming Mark Graber, the University System of Maryland Regents Professor, only the seventh, I think, in the history of the system. Mark Graber, Professor of Law and Political Science, who will join us to answer five questions about his research. And we'll get started in just one moment after I say, welcome, Mark. So nice to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Mark, let me just tell you before we begin two things. First is a note I want to tell you about, and then the second is a thank you. So the first is a note. You were nominated for this series. We have readers and viewers, and when I publish the interviews on iConnect, the blog, I invite people to nominate future interviewees, and someone nominated you. So you are in high demand, my friend.
At least by one person.
Well, I had to confirm the nomination, so at least by two, but I think it's many, many more than that. The second thing I wanted to just highlight before we begin, Mark, is a thank you. A thank you on behalf of ICONS, on behalf of the co-presidents, Lorenzo Cassini and Roz Dixon, because you have, over the course of the past couple of months, in fact, years, of course, been a great friend of ICONS, but more specifically, over the past couple of months, you have built a network of your colleagues and an extended set of colleagues around the idea of constitutional democracy and whether it is, in fact, in crisis. And you've built a number of panels that will be highlighted at ICONS. So we want to thank you for all the energy and all the organizational talent that you've brought to bring people together around what is really a big and important idea. So on behalf of the co-presidents, I want to say thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure doing it. ICONS really has supported this, and we're looking forward to a very strong and fruitful constitutional democracy group.
Great. So let's begin, Mark, with the first question, which is, what is it that you're researching and writing right now?
Two things. The first is primarily American. It's a book called Constructing Constitutional Politics. It is an argument that the 14th Amendment, which is normally seen as a source of substantive rights, was not regarded as such by the framers. The framers were concerned with provisions we no longer care about. What they were interested in doing is creating a constitutional politics that would be run by the Republican Party or the people who were committed to racial equality and anti-slavery. They were less concerned with legal rules than who controlled the government, on the assumption that if the government is controlled by people who are committed to racial equality, you will get a fair degree of racial equality no matter what the Constitution says. If the government is controlled by white supremacists, you will get lots of white supremacy no matter what the Constitution says. The other is I'm pivoting to a project based on constitutional democracy in crisis, which has a working title of Thickened, Progressive, Cosmopolitan, Constitutional Democracy, Awkward in Practice, Theory, and Syntax. No one's going to allow me to keep the title, which I like, but the idea is that over the past 100 years, our notion of what a constitutional democracy is has thickened. It's no longer rule of law and elections. It's lots of rights. It's lots of inclusiveness. And I want to highlight the problems in practice, the problems in theory this has created, all the while saying, in fact, this is the best form of constitutional democracy.
Two very important projects. Just on the second, it seems to me that an important point that you're likely to highlight in that project, whether it's a book or a paper, is that we seem to ally between constitutional democracy and liberal democracy. When one says the former, they really do mean the latter.
Well, in one sense, we've now become liberal but liberal not in a John Stuart Mill, but in a sense of sort of modern liberalism, where inclusiveness is vital, social rights are vital, and we really haven't figured out how to run a constitutional democracy with all those commitments. And my notion is it's likely to run imperfectly, but governments run imperfectly. They run awkwardly, which is why I sort of like my awkward in theory, practice, and syntax to say there is no catchy phrase or easy solution out there.
I look forward to seeing that, Mark. I really do. So how and when do you write? Do you have a routine, or do you just write whenever you have the time to write, whenever and wherever that might be?
I have a summer routine. I'm a morning person. I wake up fairly early. I like, once school is over, to start writing or researching from about 7 until 11. Then I take a long bicycle ride for exercise, usually 12 miles, get a lunch. And during the bicycle ride, I think about what I've written and revise afterwards. Ever since I was a child, I'm one of those persons who needs to think doing lots of heavy exercise or robust exercise. I wrote most of my high school term papers shooting baskets. I'm not sure I can advise graduate students to do that, but there are people who think when they're running on a treadmill. I think on my bicycle, and in fact, when I'm stuck on a paper, I go out and ride. But I've learned I write in the morning, that what I write in the evening usually gets ripped up in the morning.
And Mark, when did you know that this is the life that you wanted for yourself? That is to say, when did you know that you wanted to be a professor, an academic, a scholar?
I went to a small college, and I really loved my professors. And I loved doing research projects. Some people complain about long papers and honors theses. I really had a ball doing my honors theses. I then went to law school because I was scared about getting a job. And I did a lot of volunteer work for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, doing capital punishment work, anti-capital punishment work. And I really learned there I was an academic. I admire cause lawyers enormously. They are terrific. But I kept wanting to go down certain nooks and crannies that weren't really relevant to the case. And I learned the most important thing from a law school clinical, that I wasn't a lawyer. I was an academic. And even a little thing, when I went back to grad school, I made more friends than I ever made in law school. These are people like me.
Well, you've built a wonderful career, Mark, and we look forward to many more contributions, especially the 2 papers and books that you're working on right now. But let's stay with your time as a student. Was there a paper at the time, a book at the time, something that really moved you, touched you at the time, that continues to this day to be important to how you think about public law?
Well, this demonstrates I'm an academic nerd. It's the works of Quentin Skinner and the wonderful phrase, "All revolutionaries march backwards into battle." I found I could make a living even as an undergraduate if someone said this famous thinker contradicts themselves. They probably didn't see it as a contradiction. What was it in their intellectual milieu that made them not see it as a contradiction? How did they put together the ideas of their time to create something new? So to give a simple example, one of the books I'm most known for is a book called Dred Scott and the Problem of Constitutional Evil. And people, until the book, and mostly afterward too, said the Tawney opinion is horrible legal craft. Well, 50% of the country didn't think so. Was it simply because they were so pro-slavery as to be blinded? Or what was the set of ideas that Tawney was working with so we can better understand his pro-slavery views? And I got this method from Quentin Skinner, so I'm always happy when I can go back to his essays and give it a cite, because this is what I call originalism in legal history, which has nothing to do with originalism in legal theory. The thing Skinner, in fact, taught is when you do originalist as an historian of ideas, you learn why you can't be an originalist as a constitutional interpreter.
You've told us about a book that was influential to you in your thinking. Now, what about your own work? Among all of the papers and books and chapters and edited volumes that you have written, is there one, Mark? Is there one that is maybe most meaningful to you that you think is your dearest, most important publication? I ask this, Mark, because I would like to share a link to that publication with our readers and viewers. So when we publish this interview, I'll do my best to include a link to this book or paper, whatever you're going to tell me in just one moment, so that our readers and viewers can learn more about you and your work.
There is an obvious answer and a less obvious answer. The obvious answer to what is your most important work is the work that has been cited the most, a piece called The Non-Majoritarian Problem, Legislative Deference to the Judiciary. My favorite piece is a piece I wrote 4 years after that called The Passive-Aggressive Virtues. First reason why I like it is I love the title and I'm married to a psychiatrist. The second reason is there's an opinion in the United States called Cohen versus Virginia. And everybody studies the first part where the Supreme Court says they have jurisdiction over a state. And nobody studies the second part where the Supreme Court says, but by the way, the state wins. What I was able to do is discover that in fact, the second part was fictional, that the state should have lost, that this was a court that was proclaiming great power, but never using it. And I remember at the end of the paper looking for a conclusion and suddenly writing a sentence of the form, John Marshall did not create judicial supremacy. Judicial supremacy happened when other officials accepted Marshall's claim that the court was supreme. To understand when the court is supreme, you have to look at other officials and not justices. And only then did I understand what I had written in The Non-Majoritarian Problem. So that's why this is my favorite piece.
Yes. Well, I'm going to link to your favorite piece, Mark, when we publish this interview on iConnect. And that closes our fun time together. It really was fun to see you and chat with you and learn a bit about how you write and how you research and how you read and your scholarly influences over the course of your career. So thank you very, very much, Mark Graber.
Thank you.